So every day there are millions of Americans who, Americans, will put that in quotes, they're behind bars. But every day there's millions of people who spend their time behind bars. They are incarcerated generally for a longer period of time. And I guess the point of this speech is the distinction between nonviolent offenders and violent offenders, because they get mixed up all the time. In my personal view, this speech is intended to persuade that nonviolent offenders should not be in the same place as violent offenders. So I'm currently an EMT and then a paramedic student at SCC, and then my kind of expertise or experiences of this particular topic, I was a corrections officer / corporal for 6 months back when I was 18. I was at the actual facility, like with the inmates full time. It would have been 4.5-ish months. I was with the Nebraska Department of Corrections from, it would have been February 2017 to July 2017. So I was at the Diagnostics and Evaluation Center. That particular facility is out by Pioneers Park, and then they're there for like 30 to 90 days to get evaluated to see if they go to community corrections or Tecumseh or whatever kind of more permanent prison they're at. So I'm going to take you through some distinctions of nonviolent, violent offenders. The type of environment, like, is the prison really is going to be the biggest thing that kind of makes you it's very easy to say, oh, just send them to prison, but like when you're there, it's almost a shell shock. Like, it's an entirely different mindset change. There's a lot that goes into it that like not a lot of people know. And then I'll also kind of give you the backstory on the prison, some personal stories and stuff like that on why I believe nonviolent offenders should not be with violent offenders. So the difference between nonviolent and violent offenders, the definition of a nonviolent offender from the Bureau or Statistics of Justice was it is a person who is charged with or convicted of an offense that is punishable by a term of imprisonment exceeding 1 year, during the course of which that offense was a firearm or like a use of force to make somebody do something, basically. And then nonviolent is obviously things that didn't involve violence or a firearm or anything like that. And those are generally based on severity of like the property damage that person did, or like if they stole somebody's dog or they stole somebody's car. So like something that's not violent, or a lot of those do get coincide with gun charges or things like that. So a lot of the people in prison are violent, and a lot of those crimes do kind of go hand in hand. So the New York Times, they did a 3-year study, and they had criminologists, lawyers, and statistical analysis. It was, like I said, it was 3 years, and they looked at like prison populations, violent offenders, and all that type of stuff. What they came up with was that so a total about 39% of inmates behind bars are like they're there without really any like public safety rationale, because a lot of times they'll, go repay your debt to society is what they'll say. And so 25% of that 39, they're low-level or nonviolent drug offenders generally, and their crimes can be taken care of by probation, community service, or like drug treatment for kind of the heroin, meth addicts, that type of stuff. And then the other 14% are people who did do serious crimes, but they've been there so long that like if you talk to them, when they talk to them and stuff, they're no longer like deemed a threat to society, if you will. So there's, according to the documentary 13th, it's on Netflix. It's actually a really good documentary if you guys want to watch it. But 2.2 million people are incarcerated in America, and then America has 1/4 of all people in the United States are in America. All 1/4 of people worldwide behind bars are located here. So there's a lot that goes in, mass incarceration. You can argue it's a race thing. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but this one, we're focused on nonviolent, violent drug offenders here. So it's led to the term mass incarceration because it really is. There's a huge spike since the 1990s because of tough on crime, and there is a certain trend that follows. The more people that are doing crimes are behind bars, like crime rates will drop. But there's a point where like that doesn't work anymore because it just becomes impractical. I think it was its average inmate cost like $31,000 a year or something like that. So prison is a very, very volatile place, and so this might get kind of graphic or might not be the most politically correct things, the stories and stuff I kind of share. But so when I worked there, I was at the facility for about 4.5 months. Overcrowding is a huge issue. Like we had, so there were 32 inmates sleeping on cots, like on the ground, and then, 21, and then there were 32 in the cells. So like when I went to go do cell checks, I was, I had a flashlight. I was like literally stepping over inmates who were in there for probably, attempted murder and all that crap, and then going to check the cells and stuff like that. So on paper, if the inmates like really wanted to do something, they would have. In reality, a lot of the inmates that are in prison are there, even if they are violent, they're just like, I'm there to do my time, get out. That kind of head down mentality is a huge thing. Like, I'm not going to keep a shank on me. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to kind of like keep my head down and try. But like that isn't like realistically, not very many people are able to do that unless you're a really big guy and people don't really want to mess with you. Like that's one thing. But so the prison environment, it's a huge like shift mentally. And what I mean by that is there's a convict code, which is like there's the inmates rules and then there's the prison systems rules. And most of the inmates are going to choose the inmates rules all the time because like the COs, the prison, we don't really run that place. It's the inmates. Like if the inmates really wanted to do something, you see riots and stuff like all that. Like the inmates are going to do something if they really wanted to. Like I said, I was stepping over inmates on the ground. Like they weren't restrained. They were just sleeping. And that's where the mix of nonviolent and violent offenders kind of starts. Like, for example, like you have to, inmates think very differently. Like you think very differently on the inside. It's very almost primitive in a way. Like if you're bigger, you're not going to get messed with as much, right? So, and then race is a huge thing. Gangs are separated by race. Even if you're not a gang member, if you want to survive in prison, you're basically going to end up choosing a gang. If I went to prison, I'm black, I'm going to be with a black gang. Like, I can't go over the Hispanics or the whites. Like, regardless of what they are, what they believe, a lot of the white, like, gang members aren't actually racist, but now they have to be racist because they're in prison for meth or whatever else. So, like, it requires that kind of shift. And, like, if I go up to talk to an inmate, you don't, like, talk to him one-on-one, like, squared up. Like, you kind of talk to him off to the side. Because if you walked up to an inmate and just talked to him normally, like you would somebody, they'd think you're squaring up and, like, are you trying to fight? Now you have an entirely, like, another issue. So you got to, like, you just have to tread carefully. There's gangs, there's territories. Like, on the inmate side, like, they have so much more to, like, worry about other than not passing contraband. So, like, to be honest, like, they couldn't really give a crap if I catch them with, whatever it is. So around here, Tecumseh is where they send all the, like, the bad inmates. And then so overcrowding, the reason that it's overcrowded is they told me they plan it 10 years in advance based on algorithms, but they didn't expect that, like, how many more people were going to be arrested because the amount of people kept doing that. So they built the prisons 10 years ago based on what they thought the population was going to be in 10 years, and it clearly did not work. So, so like I said, inmates choose. So if you were to get in a fight in a prison, it's zero tolerance. So it's generally 30 days in segregation. Now they call it restricted housing because it sounds better for people, but it's segregation. Like it's solitary. Like I remember the first time I saw it, I walked in and like their rec time, like usually you get an hour of rec time. Their rec time is literally like a 15 by like 5 foot cell, and they're still shackled, they're still handcuffed. They just like pace. I remember they look like lions. Like they're barbed wire and crap all over there, and they just pace and pacing. That's their rec time. Fighting, that'll actually be a separate thing here, but that's obviously a huge thing. And then it's such a violent environment that if you're not violent and you get placed into it, you basically either have to decide, am I going to be violent or am I going to get my butt kicked? So if an inmate gets in a fight, if they're not violent or anything, the inmate doing it, the inmate who's being assaultive, like if you swing at all, even if you are being attacked for your own self-defense, like you're going to seg. Like it's zero tolerance. So if you throw a swing, like it's over. So you basically have the choice of, do I want to sit here, get my butt beat, look like a punk in front of the entire unit, have more problems, or do I want to swing back, do 30 days in seg, and now I'm a violent offender. I have that on my record, like I'm a fighter. So they're really just 30-second to like 2-minute fights, but like so much damage gets caused, like it's insane. I walked in I only saw one fight, like actually happened in front of me. I responded to one. And I remember this was, like I said, there might be some graphic stuff I described, but one inmate was getting taken down, and he yelled at this other inmate, and I walked up. I didn't have any gloves on. He was like on his knees, bent, and it wasn't like a normal bloody nose, like dripping. It was like pouring out of his nose. There were chunks in like the puddle, and I was like, oh my god. And so I went, I don't have any gloves. Like someone else needs to take this. So like, and that was only like we were there within 35 something seconds, and this dude like had just. The inmates were telling him he was beating him, and then he kicked him in the face, and like they really don't screw around. They'll put locks, like those padlocks in socks, and just boom, like they'll put hits out. They'll do it simultaneously across the whole facility, so the emergency responders are just like totally spread thin. So they know what they're doing. Like I said, the inmates are the ones that really run those facilities. So like you're putting someone who was addicted to meth or heroin, and now they're in this environment, and it's like. There's a lot that can go wrong, minus like the physical stuff. That obviously rape and sexual, like that's a 100% real thing. Like if someone's bigger than you, I mean, I don't know what else you're going to do. And then the COs, like, you can argue, oh, they're there for, like, they're there to do stuff and protect, right? But it's, you got to realistically think, you know, I'm 18 years old, even if you're 35, and you're in there. If an inmate, 2 inmates are sitting there shanking somebody, what am I supposed to do about that? Like that really sucks for that guy in there, but I'm not going to walk in and go ahead and, like, start spraying. So you got to, like really, you're almost on your own as an inmate there. So the fighting is a huge thing, and then it's generally a 30-day minimum in segregation or restrictive housing for the fighting. And then, so there aren't really many, like, actual statistics for the violence that happens in prison. A lot of times it goes unreported, or they, like, the prisons don't want to be known as violent prisons. That just causes a lot of issues. So generally the fights within the prison, if they don't catch more charges for it, they don't get out. If there's murders or something that happen, generally they obviously have to report it because Nebraska State Patrol and everybody comes in. But, so it is, like, it's almost, like, you'd argue it's a deadly place, because it really is. Like, if you don't tread carefully and you don't know kind of the unwritten rules, like, for lack of better words, like, you're screwed. Because, like, you're gonna mistrip, you're gonna step in somebody else's territory, and next thing you know, you got 5 people, you know, beating your crap in, and then you're in the hospital for 2-3 months. So according to the Bureau of Justice, the statistics, 20% of state and jail prison inmates end up in restrictive housing. I'd be willing to bet that a lot of those are due to fighting and stuff. That's generally the biggest reason they are. Improvised weapons are also, you know, a huge thing that adds to it. Like, there's shanks that are found, you know, they're pretty big. Like, they've been, like, axes, like double-sided axes that have been found. They hide them in common areas, so when you find them, you're like, can't charge one specific person with them. So, like, sometimes people have, like, little specific, like, tinier shanks. Other times you'll find some, like, big, like machete-looking stuff, and it, like, what am I going to do as a CO? Like, I have pepper spray, handcuffs, and then, like, in a badge, and that's really it. And then I have some stuff for gloves. Like I said, there really aren't many statistics I can rattle off for that, because not a lot of studies have been done. And I don't think we'll ever, like, really know how much kind of stuff goes on behind bars. But I can tell you, like, from personal experience, that there is a lot of fighting, there is a lot of crap that you probably won't want to see happen to people. It does happen to people. So, in conclusion, like, nonviolent offenders should not be housed with violent offenders. There are plenty of alternatives for a lot of those people, whether it be treatment, community corrections, even a jail sentence for repeat offenders is better than a prison sentence, because jail, you know, people are there for 30-something days. They don't really have the same, like, pod bosses, if you will. Like, the longer-term jails do, but there are plenty of alternatives for nonviolent offenders versus putting them in such a violent, volatile place, because it's an environment not a lot of people think about, and it's very easy to forget about people when you send them there. But, like, it affects the staff, I can personally tell you, for being in that type of place for 16 hours a day with the mandatory overtime and stuff. And then, like, it's just basically a life of, like, you don't really have any genuine personal interactions with anybody, because there's no trust, like, anywhere in that facility. You can't trust anybody, or else, like, your life's in danger if you do. So that's the biggest thing. I encourage you, you know, mandatory overtime, mass incarceration. There's plenty of topics that kind of go hand in hand with this. So if you are interested, I encourage you guys to go ahead and look more into it. And I appreciate all you guys for your time. And that's it. And let me show everybody. And that's it. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.